Well, speaking of the British population, a new police report now estimates, get this, at least 1 in 12 women in England and Wales will be victim of violence every single year. Now, the reason this has hit the headlines today is because now National Police Chiefs Council have described this issue as, I quote, a national emergency. Also, coming up in the line of fire, shall we say, is people like Andrew Tate. Apparently he is responsible for radicalising boys into what people are calling extreme misogyny. Ella Whelan, where are you on all this?
I think that it's really irresponsible to try and confuse the issue of violence against women with these headline-grabbing statements on people like Andrew Tate. We know that the vast majority of cases of violence against women, and sadly, a lot of them that end in deaths, are in a domestic violence setting with repeated abuse from partners, who are known to the people. It's not teenagers looking at horrible rubbish on the internet that is causing the vast majority of this violence. So to try and really cover up or avoid blame for what is police inadequacy by making big statements about Andrew Tate is irresponsible. We know that that's something that could drastically change the numbers of women that suffer from violence at the hands of partners is by proper police work, of following up complaints, of treating women with respect, of all the rest of it. It's just the boring, everyday, adequate policing. So that makes me really angry. But I do think there is a conversation to be had about inceldom, this idea, and Andrew Tate, and this sort of weird rise of the internet and the influence of the internet on, particularly on young men, whether it's porn or anything else, and the sort of crisis of masculinity. All of that is a thing that I think we should be talking about with kids, with young people. But the idea that if you suddenly banned Andrew Tate off YouTube or blocked young people's access to the internet, violence against women would disappear is a nonsense. I think it's a really lazy and easy way out of a very complicated issue.
Jack?
Well, look, it's hard to disagree with anything you said. I mean, I think the first thing is Andrew Tate is a vile, horrible individual who has abhorrent views. But parents, I think, also have to accept that if we don't, I've got 3 kids, I know loads of viewers will have their own children. If we don't talk to our own children about things like the views of Andrew Tate, then he is going to be educating them for us on our behalf. And as a parent, I find that absolutely terrifying.
What views of his do you dislike so much? Well, I don't know him, by the way, so you say he's an awful person. I don't know him, so...
Well, the fact that he's referred to women as inherently idle. He said that women are the possession of men. He said that when women get married, they become the possession of their husband, and the husband should be completely free to abuse them in any way that he wants. I think he's a self-proclaimed misogynist. I think they are vile, abhorrent and completely unacceptable views in any modern society.
But isn't it, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because I do confess I am not an avid follower of Andrew Tate, but isn't it he's someone that kind of longs for a return to how society once was, i.e. that men were the breadwinner, that women were staying at home to raise a family, and that they did rely on their husband to provide for them, that they didn't go out to work. Isn't that what he's trying to create?
Well,
I ask that as an innocent question.
Michelle, just like the Taliban, he has a similar view about women as the Taliban have. And let's not forget that he has also been charged with a series, not yet gone to trial, very serious sexual offences in Romania, and is awaiting trial for the exploitation and people trafficking of women.
Obviously, I've got to say, he's not here to defend himself, of course, and I'm sure he would push back against a lot of what's just been said. Ella?
Well, I think it's a bit futile to try and psychologically unpick him. He's a bit like a male Katie Hopkins. He's an attention seeker. He's one of these influencers that says shocking things. Well, there's some nobody kid from Luton who's decided to make his name by smoking cigars and doing ridiculous things on the internet. Actually, there's been some really interesting interviews with young men who watch his videos, and a lot of them say, all the women's stuff, yeah, I know that's silly. I'm not interested in that. I'm friends with girls and I know that they're not, meant to, you know, their life's work isn't to make me a sandwich. But the thing that they're interested in is sort of his celebrity, his fame, his big cars, and, you know, the sort of stupid stuff that teenagers are interested in. So I think we're giving him too much influence by panicking too much about him. And instead, we actually, you know, there are some very serious things that we could be talking about in relation to men and women's relationship, women's freedom. I'm open to those conversations, but we fail if we become obsessed with Andrew Tate.
Let me quickly bring some stats in. This violence against women and girls. Apparently, there's 2 million victims every year. There's 2.3 million perpetrators every year. 20% of all police-recorded crimes are linked to violence against women and girls. They reckon that the fastest-growing groups of victims and perpetrators are aged 16 to 19. There's a few things I just want to throw out there. So one of the issues that I've got about this is the lack of data. We don't seem to really understand who are perpetrating these crimes. Often, when we start trying to track, a lot of police forces, when they start trying to track the sex of the individual, because I bet my bottom dollar it's men doing this, you can track the data however this person decides to identify. So this person could decide to identify as a female. That goes down as female on female crime. And you mentioned the Taliban. I cannot help but notice that we do seem to have a habit of importing quite a lot of people into this country who perhaps do see someone like myself, a woman, as lower than and less than them. And that is their culture. What do you think to that?
Well, I think you make a really good point. The fact that people can self-identify as whatever they want when they're talking to a police officer is just the nonsense of society, and I think people do want to push back against that.
But you guys introduced self-ID.
No, we didn't.
I thought it was pushed under people like Theresa May.
No, it wasn't introduced by us. In fact, we pushed back against self-ID. It was introduced in Scotland. The SNP tried to do it, and we pushed back against that really severely.
Previous to that, I'm talking about.
You were big fans of it.
The important thing to remember about him, and I think what we've got to be really concerned about as parents and people who care about young people, is all the things he's pushing is 30 supercars, smoking cigars, being a multi-millionaire. That is a Trojan horse to appeal to young men, and I'm the only man on the panel to appeal to young men, then to use that to become a trusted source for them to then get their views on women. And that's why we should be concerned about it. And what I say is, where are the parents in this? Because as I said at the start, if you are not educating your children about reasonable views on women and girls, Andrew Tate is doing it for you.
But what about my other issue then? That we are importing a lot of men into this society who culturally do not see women as equals. Why is no one addressing that issue?
Well, look, that is the problem of multiculturalism. I believe, like Suella Braverman, it has a lot of failings about it. People who come to the UK should assimilate into our society.
Yeah, but they don't.
And take on the views of the UK.
Yeah, but they're not. That's my issue. No one seems to be talking. We can sit here and say they should, but they're not.
Well, I mean, I think it would be quite good to find out what we do think about women's freedom as a society, because there's lots of members of, for example, the Conservative Party who, not for a second suggesting they hold similar views to Islamists, but I would disagree vehemently with their view of women's position in society, or what a woman's role should be, legal freedoms that women might have, whether it's around abortion or anything else. So an open discussion about, if Andrew Tate does nothing else other than provoke an open discussion about women's freedom, women's standing in society, whether it's in relation to violence or
not one, but not two, but three female prime ministers from the Conservative Party.
All three of them did absolutely nothing beneficial for the furtherment of women's freedom. I mean, you know, just being a woman and wearing a skirt doesn't make you useful to me.
Well, anyway, I was just about to make a witty comment then about self-ID, but I've decided I don't want to stress myself out.